Hi there. I'm glad you're here tonight. There's something about nighttime that invites a different kind of attention. Not sharp. Not focused. Just gently aware. The world feels a little farther away. And your thoughts feel closer. During the day, time often feels like something you move through. Step by step. Task by task. But at night, time doesn't behave quite the same way. You may have noticed that hours pass quietly. Or that a single thought seems to stretch and soften. Lingering longer than it would during the day. This isn't imagination. And it isn't a mistake. It's something your mind has always known how to do. Time, as you experience it, is not only measured by clocks. It's shaped by attention. By light. By safety. By how much the world is asking of you. At night, the demands lessen. The brain notices this immediately. You don't need to respond as quickly. You don't need to decide as often. You don't need to prepare for what comes next. And when those pressures ease, your sense of time changes with them. You may feel moments widen. As if there's more space inside each one. Or you may feel time become vague. Less important to track. This is one of the mind's most gentle abilities. It knows when precision is needed. And when it can relax its grip. Night is one of those times. As darkness settles in, your brain begins to shift away from prediction. And toward presence. Instead of constantly asking what's next, it begins to notice what's here. Breathing becomes easier to feel. Thoughts become less urgent. The body starts to settle into itself. And somewhere in that settling, time loosens. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer needs to be monitored. This is where the night begins to feel different. Not only outside, but inside. And once you notice that difference, it's hard to unnotice it. Because it's been there all along. The brain doesn't carry a single clock. Instead, it holds many quiet ways of sensing time. Each shaped by what you're doing. And how much attention is required. During the day, time is often measured through action. Movement. Decision. Response. Each task creates a small marker. A before and an after. That's why busy hours feel dense. Packed tightly together. At night, many of those markers disappear. The brain no longer needs to segment the world so precisely. Without constant external cues, time becomes something felt, rather than tracked. One part of the brain, deep and ancient, keeps rhythm without numbers. It notices cycles instead of minutes. Breathing. Heart rate. Light fading. Temperature settling. These rhythms were guiding human life long before clocks existed. And when the environment grows quieter, the brain naturally returns to them. Another system, quieter still, measures time through memory. Not what happens, but how much is remembered. When fewer new memories are formed, time feels as though it moves faster. When thoughts wander freely, time feels wider. At night, memory formation slows. The brain begins sorting rather than storing. Moments are less likely to be stamped and filed. So they blend together. This blending is not loss. It's preparation. As the mind shifts toward rest, precision gives way to continuity. Instead of noticing each second, the brain notices flow. This is why nighttime thoughts often feel timeless. even when hours pass. Nothing is wrong with this sensation. It's the brain doing what it evolved to do. When vigilance is no longer required. You might notice this when you're lying still. Eyes closed. Breath steady. A thought arises. It drifts. Another follows. There's no clear beginning or end. And without those boundaries, time gently dissolves. Not into nothing, but into something softer. Something easier to inhabit. This is not the brain shutting down. It's the brain changing modes. Moving from measurement to presence. And this shift sets the stage for everything that follows. Both in the night and within you. As night deepens, the brain's chemistry begins to shift. Quietly and without announcement. It's not a sudden change. There's no switch being flipped. Instead, levels adjust gradually. Like light fading from a room. One of the first changes happens with alertness chemicals. Substances that keep attention sharp during the day begin to soften. This doesn't make thinking disappear. It changes how thinking feels. Thoughts lose their edges. They become less linear. Less urgent. Connections form more loosely. At the same time, another process begins to rise. One that favors internal experience over external focus. The brain becomes more inward-facing. This is why sounds feel farther away at night. And why memories, images, and ideas can feel closer than the room around you. Perception slowly turns inward. Not as an effort, but as a preference. There is also a subtle change in how the brain processes emotion. During the day, emotional signals are often filtered through action. What needs to be done next? How to respond? What matters immediately? At night, that filter relaxes. Emotions aren't louder. But they are allowed to exist without direction. This is why nighttime thoughts can feel meaningful. Even when they are simple. A memory might surface. Not to be solved. Just noticed. A feeling might arise. Not demanding explanation. The brain is no longer asking, "What should I do with this?" It's simply allowing it to pass through. There is also a gentle shift in how the brain senses the body. Muscle tone decreases. Breathing slows. Internal signals become more rhythmic. The mind begins syncing with the body's pace. This synchronization is important. When the brain and body move at similar rhythms, experience feels smoother. Less fragmented. Time stretches not because it slows, but because nothing is pulling it forward. This is often when imagination becomes more vivid, yet less controlled. Images drift in and out. Ideas form without structure. The brain is not trying to create a narrative. It's exploring freely. This is a state humans have entered every night. For thousands of years. Long before artificial light. Long before schedules. It's a state that once guided sleep naturally. Without effort. You may notice that in this state, questions feel more interesting than answers. Thoughts don't demand conclusions. And curiosity becomes gentle. Not restless. This is the chemistry of night at work. Not to entertain. Not to stimulate. But to prepare. To soften awareness. To widen perception. And to make room. For rest to arrive on its own terms. As the world grows darker. The mind begins to change the way it pays attention. Light has always been one of the strongest organizers of human awareness. It tells the brain where to look, what to focus on, and how quickly to move between things. When light fades, those instructions become softer. Attention no longer needs to stay sharp or narrow. Instead, it widens. This is one reason nighttime feels spacious. Even in familiar rooms. Without strong visual detail, the brain stops scanning constantly. It doesn't search the environment as actively. This reduces mental effort. The mind begins to rest, even while still awake. Darkness also changes how the brain fills in gaps. During the day, vision dominates perception. At night, the brain relies more on memory, imagination, and internal sensing. This isn't confusion. It's a shift in balance. The mind becomes less anchored to what is directly visible, and more open to what is quietly present. This is why nighttime thoughts often feel symbolic or abstract. The brain is no longer prioritizing precision. It's allowing impressions. Attention also becomes less goal-oriented. During the day, attention is often pulled forward, toward the next task, the next decision. At night, there is less pulling. Awareness settles into the present moment. Not because it's trying to, but because there is nowhere else it needs to be. This creates a sense of timelessness. Not because time disappears, but because attention stops measuring it. Minutes feel softer. Moments stretch. The mind stops asking, "How long has this been?" and begins resting in, "This is enough." Darkness also supports emotional safety. In lower light, the brain reduces threat detection. This doesn't mean vigilance disappears, but it relaxes. The world feels quieter, more predictable. This is one reason nighttime often feels reflective. Thoughts surface gently, without pressure. There is room to observe without reacting. Social scientists have noticed this pattern across cultures. Night has long been associated with storytelling, reflection, and shared quiet. Not because night demands it, but because the mind naturally enters a receptive state. This receptive state allows curiosity to exist without urgency. Ideas can be explored without needing answers. Questions don't feel heavy. They feel like passing clouds. In this state, time becomes experiential rather than measured. It's not about clocks. It's about presence. And presence doesn't rush. As darkness deepens, attention continues to soften. The mind becomes less focused on edges, and more aware of space. Less interested in details, and more comfortable with impressions. This is not a loss of clarity. It's a different kind of clarity. One that doesn't push forward. One that allows the moment to unfold slowly. And in this unfolding, the sense of time becomes gentler, wider, and easier to inhabit. As night settles more fully, the way memory moves begins to change. During the day, memory is often practical. It's used to solve problems, recall details, and plan what comes next. At night, memory loosens its grip on usefulness. It becomes quieter, less task-driven, more fluid. Memories don't arrive in straight lines anymore. They surface gently, sometimes without clear reasons. A sound may bring back a place. A feeling may recall a moment. without the need to name it. This happens because the brain's focus shifts inward. External demands fall away. And the mind begins to wander in safer territory. The hippocampus, a structure deeply involved in memory, also plays a role in time perception. When it slows its activity, time feels less structured. Memories become less anchored to when they happened, and more connected to how they felt. This is why at night, a memory from years ago can feel close, almost present. Not urgent, not heavy, just nearby. The past doesn't arrive to be analyzed. It arrives to be observed. And observation without judgment is restful. Social psychologists have noted that nighttime reflection often carries less emotional intensity. People report fewer sharp reactions, less self-criticism, and more acceptance. This isn't because the mind is tired. It's because the mind is less defensive. At night, there is less need to protect identity, to perform, or to explain. Memory becomes narrative instead of evidence. It doesn't demand conclusions. It simply drifts through awareness, like pages turning slowly. This drifting changes the feeling of time. Instead of moving forward, time begins to fold inward. Moments layer gently. Past, present, and imagination overlap softly. This overlap creates a sense of continuity. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels missing. The brain recognizes that there is no immediate demand. And in the absence of demand, time relaxes. Even future-oriented thoughts begin to fade. Plans lose their sharpness. Deadlines dissolve into vague outlines. The future doesn't disappear. It just steps back. And what remains is a gentle present, supported by memory, but not controlled by it. This state is deeply comforting. It reminds the mind that it doesn't always have to move forward. It can pause. It can revisit. It can rest inside experience without measuring progress. As memory continues to soften, time becomes less directional. It stops pointing somewhere. It becomes a space. A quiet field of awareness, where thoughts pass slowly, and nothing insists on being resolved. And in this space, the mind naturally prepares for rest. Not by force. Not by instruction. But by remembering that it knows how to let go. As the night deepens, something subtle happens across the body. Many separate rhythms begin to align. During the day, the body runs on competing clocks. Heart rate responds to movement. Breathing adjusts to speech and effort. Digestion follows meals. Attention jumps between tasks. Each system keeps its own time. At night, those clocks start to agree. Breathing slows first. Not dramatically. Just enough to be noticed. The heart follows. Beats stretch slightly farther apart. Blood pressure eases downward. Muscles release tension they didn't realize they were holding. These changes are small, but they happen together. And when systems synchronize, time feels different. The brain is highly sensitive to internal rhythm. When signals arrive at different speeds, time feels fragmented. When signals arrive together, time feels smooth. This is why night often feels cohesive. There are fewer interruptions inside the body. Fewer messages competing for attention. The nervous system shifts toward its parasympathetic state, sometimes called the rest and restore mode. This state doesn't rush. It doesn't push. It sustains. Social scientists studying evening routines have noticed something interesting. People tend to describe nighttime experiences using longer phrases, slower speech, and softer descriptions. Language itself slows down. Words stretch. Pauses feel comfortable. This reflects the body's internal alignment. When the body isn't arguing with itself, the mind doesn't feel pressure to move quickly. Time begins to feel like a gentle current, instead of a series of moments to pass through. Even sensations change. Touch feels warmer. Sounds feel rounder. Light feels heavier. These sensory shifts alter time perception. When sensations are intense and sharp, time feels fast. When sensations are soft and continuous, time feels slow. The body is quietly shaping your experience of time. Without asking for attention. There is no announcement. No signal. Just a gradual settling. The digestive system slows its pace. Energy use becomes more efficient. The brain reduces external monitoring. All of this frees mental space. Space where thoughts don't need to line up. Space where awareness can spread out. And as awareness spreads, time stops feeling narrow. It widens. Moments feel fuller, even as they move more slowly. This is not a loss of time. It's an expansion of experience. A single minute can feel generous. A quiet hour can feel complete. The body understands that night is not for efficiency. It is for continuity. For maintenance. For balance. And as the body's clocks continue to agree, the mind follows their lead. It stops measuring. Stops tracking. Stops counting. Time becomes something you are inside of, rather than something passing by. This shared rhythm is one of the reasons night feels safe. When systems agree, there is less internal conflict. And without conflict, there is no urgency. Just presence. Just quiet movement forward. Unnoticed. As light fades, attention changes its shape. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. It loosens. During the day, attention is pulled outward. Edges matter. Details demand recognition. Movement asks to be tracked. Light sharpens boundaries. Darkness does the opposite. When the visual field quiets, the brain no longer needs to scan constantly. Peripheral awareness relaxes. The mind stops checking what might happen next. This reduction in visual demand frees attention. But instead of becoming sharper, it becomes broader. Attention spreads. It becomes less focused on any one thing, and more open to continuity. This is why thoughts at night often drift. Not because the mind is tired, but because it no longer needs to anchor itself tightly. In social psychology, this state is sometimes described as diffuse attention. It's the kind of attention present during listening, daydreaming, or quiet observation. Diffuse attention doesn't rush. It doesn't evaluate quickly. It allows moments to unfold without judgment. Time feels slower here. Because attention is no longer slicing experience into pieces. Instead, experience flows. Darkness also reduces the sense of personal urgency. Without visual reminders of tasks, faces, clocks, and movement, the brain receives fewer signals that something must be done. The future feels farther away. The present feels more sufficient. Anthropologists studying pre-electric societies observed that night conversations were longer, calmer, and less goal-driven. Stories wandered. Silences were accepted. There was no pressure to conclude. This pattern still lives in the modern brain. Darkness signals that outcomes can wait. That attention can rest without consequence. And when attention rests, time stretches. The brain also shifts which networks it relies on. Analytical regions quiet slightly. Associative networks become more active. These networks connect memories, feelings, and images. Without strict order. This creates a sense of continuity rather than sequence. You may notice thoughts blending together. Images forming without clear beginnings or endings. This isn't distraction. It's integration. The brain is weaving experience rather than sorting it. And woven experience doesn't feel fast. It feels deep. Darkness also removes comparison. During the day, attention constantly compares. Light to shadow. Movement to stillness. Progress to expectation. At night, there is less to compare. Without contrast. Time loses its edges. Moments don't stand apart. They merge. This merging is calming. There is no pressure to label what's happening. Just a gentle awareness of being present. Even sound behaves differently in darkness. Without visual anchors. Sounds feel less directional. They become ambient rather than interruptive. This reduces startle responses. The nervous system stays settled. And when the nervous system stays settled, time no longer feels like it's slipping away. It feels like it's holding you. Darkness invites this softness. It doesn't demand focus. It doesn't demand understanding. It allows attention to rest in a wide, open state. A state where moments don't compete. They simply exist. And as attention softens, the sense of time follows. Not ticking. Not counting. Just unfolding quietly. At night, memory changes the way it behaves. Not by disappearing. Not by becoming unclear. But by loosening its grip on sequence. During the day, memory is often practical. It keeps time in order. It tracks what came before and what must come next. This structure is useful. It helps with planning. With cause and effect. With progress. But at night, the brain no longer needs memory to perform. It needs memory to settle. Neuroscience shows that as evening deepens, the brain begins shifting memory from short-term holding into long-term storage. This process doesn't feel active. It feels like a soft rearranging. Memories are replayed quietly. Not as full scenes, but as impressions. A tone. A feeling. A fragment of imagery. When memory shifts into this mode, time stops feeling linear. Because memory is no longer tracking order. It's blending. This is why nighttime thoughts often drift backward. Without effort. Moments from years ago can feel as close as moments from earlier today. Not because they are equally important, but because the brain is no longer measuring distance. Distance requires structure. At night, structure relaxes. Memory becomes more emotional than chronological. And emotional memory doesn't obey clocks. It exists all at once. This creates a gentle sense of timelessness. You may notice that when you think of the past at night, there's less judgment. Less urgency to analyze what should have happened differently. The brain isn't solving. It's integrating. Psychologists describe this as memory reconsolidation. Old memories briefly soften, allowing them to be stored again, sometimes with less emotional charge. This softening makes memory feel quieter. And quiet memory doesn't pull you forward or backward. It holds you in a wide present. This is another reason time feels slower at night. Because memory stops pushing. During the day, memory is often tied to identity. Who you are. What you do. What you must remember to maintain continuity. At night, identity relaxes. You don't need to be anyone specific. Memory doesn't need to reinforce a role. It can simply exist. Without role pressure. Memory loses its sharp edges. Moments feel gentler. They pass without leaving marks. This can feel comforting. There's no need to hold on to experiences. Nothing needs to be recorded. The brain knows it can let go. And when memory lets go, time follows. It stretches. It opens. It becomes less about progression. And more about presence. Even anticipation weakens at night. Future-oriented memory. Planning, rehearsing, predicting. Loses momentum. The brain receives fewer signals to prepare. This creates a sense that the future can wait. And when the future waits, the present expands. You may notice that worries soften. Not because problems vanish, but because memory is no longer amplifying them. It's storing, not strategizing. This shift reduces mental speed. Thoughts slow. They wander. They don't arrive anywhere in particular. And wandering thought doesn't measure time. It moves through experience like a current. Not a timeline. Memory, at night, becomes less like a list. And more like a landscape. You don't walk through it step by step. You're simply surrounded by it. And in a landscape, there is no hurry. Just space. Just continuity. Just quiet awareness. As memory loosens, and attention grows quieter, time begins to change in a deeper way. Not conceptually. Not philosophically. But experientially. This is where time stops feeling like something you move through. And starts feeling like something you rest inside. At night, the brain reduces its need to track duration. During the day, time is constantly checked. Measured. Referenced. Minutes are compared. Hours are counted. Progress is monitored. But as night settles in, the systems responsible for time monitoring slow down. Neuroscientists link this to reduced activity in the brain's executive networks. The areas that manage planning, sequencing, and evaluation. When those systems quiet, time loses its edges. There are fewer internal markers. Without markers, the brain cannot measure passage accurately. So instead of flowing forward, time spreads outward. This is why a few minutes can feel long, yet gentle. And why long stretches of night can pass without feeling heavy. Time no longer presses. It holds. Attention becomes softer here. Rather than focusing sharply, it widens. You may notice awareness drifting. From sound. To breath. To sensation. Without effort. This drifting isn't distraction. It's a natural narrowing of mental demand. The brain is conserving energy. And when energy use lowers, experience becomes smoother. This smoothness removes friction. Friction is what makes time feel fast or slow. Without it, time simply feels present. Psychologically, this state resembles what researchers call low arousal awareness. You are awake, but not alert. Present, but not monitoring. In this state, there is no need to track how long something lasts. Nothing requires timing. Nothing depends on duration. This creates a subtle sense of safety. Because urgency dissolves. There is nothing that must happen next. Nothing to prepare for. Nothing to finish. The mind doesn't need to lean forward. It can settle back. And when the mind settles back, time stops pulling. It no longer feels like a line. It feels like a field. A wide, quiet field. Where moments don't replace each other. They overlap. They blend. This is often when people describe feeling outside of time. Not because time has disappeared, but because attention has stopped interacting with it. Time still exists. Clocks still move. But your awareness no longer attaches to their movement. You're not following time. You're accompanying experience. This state is deeply restorative. The nervous system recognizes it as safe. Heart rate slows. Breathing deepens naturally. The body understands that it doesn't need to respond. There is no signal of threat. No demand for action. Just continuity. This is also why creativity often feels different at night. Ideas don't rush in order. They drift. They connect loosely. Without time pressure. The brain allows associations to form gently. Nothing has to be useful. Nothing has to lead anywhere. This freedom further dissolves the sense of passing time. You're no longer inside a schedule. You're inside a moment. And moments, when unmeasured, don't expire. They simply change shape. At this point, even the idea of night can soften. Darkness isn't an absence. It's a container. A quiet space where awareness can rest. Without needing to define itself. There's no requirement to stay awake. No requirement to sleep. Both are allowed. Time doesn't demand a choice. It waits. And as it waits, you may notice that thinking slows further. Not because you're trying to quiet it, but because there's nothing left for it to do. Thoughts arise. Then fade. They don't connect. They don't build. They pass like reflections on still water. This is where night becomes less about experience. And more about being. No direction. No timeline. Just presence. Holding itself. As presence deepens, even the feeling of being present begins to loosen. This is a quiet transition. Not something you notice all at once. But something you feel in the background. Like a room slowly dimming. Here, time doesn't just soften. It releases its shape entirely. Moments no longer feel distinct. There is no clear before or after. Experience becomes continuous. Not moving forward. Not standing still. Just gently unfolding. At night, the brain's sense of self grows quieter too. The boundary between you and what you're experiencing becomes less defined. This isn't disappearance. It's diffusion. Thoughts no longer announce themselves. They arise as impressions. Then dissolve before they fully form. Memory doesn't pull backward. Expectation doesn't pull forward. There's no effort to stay here. Because there's nowhere else to be. Neuroscience suggests that in these states, the brain's default networks, the ones responsible for narrative and identity, reduce their activity. When the story of me across time quiets, time itself loses relevance. There's no timeline without a narrator. Without narration, experience doesn't need sequencing. It just exists. This is why the night can feel endless, without feeling overwhelming. Why hours can pass, without being noticed. Why rest doesn't require instruction. The body understands this state. Muscles release tension gradually. Breath finds a deeper rhythm on its own. The nervous system shifts from monitoring to maintenance. Repair begins quietly. Not actively. Not dramatically. But steadily. Cells restore balance. Neural pathways recalibrate. Hormones realign their cycles. All without awareness needing to participate. Time, here, becomes supportive. Not something you use. Something that carries you. You don't move through the night. The night moves around you. And as this happens, language itself starts to feel unnecessary. Words become softer. Less precise. Meaning no longer needs clarity. Only continuity. This is where drifting feels natural. Not because you are tired, but because nothing is holding you upright. Awareness tilts gently, like a leaf resting on water. There's no resistance. No need to remain attentive. No need to remember. Even the idea of listening can fade. Sound blends with silence. Silence blends with sensation. Sensation blends with stillness. And stillness doesn't require time. It doesn't pass. It doesn't progress. It simply holds. If something pulls you back briefly, a thought, a sound, a sensation, it doesn't interrupt anything. It just rises. Then settles again. Nothing is lost. Nothing is interrupted. Because there is no sequence to break. This is where the night does its quiet work. Without direction. Without effort. Just gentle continuity. And as awareness loosens further, there's no need to follow it. No need to stay. No need to go. Time no longer needs your attention. It can continue on its own. Thank you for spending this quiet time here. If these gentle explorations bring you comfort, you're always welcome to return. Until then, rest easily. And let the night carry you.